So I have this theory that this Sunday should be the best attended Sunday every year, not because we're doing child dedications, but because it's the Browns' first game. And we should all be very much in prayer this morning over how the season will go. I got my limited edition Browns color gear on from Mosaic today. This is one of one. This is completely, it's an unfortunate coincidence that our church colors are actually Steelers colors, so I rectified that with this shirt to just represent. It's a church thing, it's not a football thing, so. All right, so we're, if you don't know, if it's your first time, we've been in the book of Esther here for a while, but before we jump into that, I want to introduce an idea. So I'm going to ask you to do something kind of weird, especially if you don't go here and you go to like a normal church. I'm going to ask you to get your phones out for a minute. Could you get your phones out? What I want you to do, if you could, is go to your Photos app, if you have an iPhone, go to All Photos and then scroll to the very bottom. If you have an Android, what I need you to do is get an iPhone, because I don't know. We have this joke. Everybody on staff, most of us have iPhones, but a couple people have Androids, and they ruin the group chat because it's green instead of blue, so we just make fun of them all the time. Here's what I want to do. This is completely opt-in. I've told you before, I hate it when preachers make you participate, so if you don't want to participate, you don't have to, but I want to find out who has the most pictures on their phone in the room right now, okay? So we're going to start the bidding at 5,000, okay? So would you raise your hand if you have 5,000 pictures on your phone right now? You find where you're looking? Okay, so we got a decent amount, 5,000. All right, I'm going to jump it because I have some experience at this doing first service. I'm just going to go straight to 10. Anybody got 10? So nobody even more hands went up. Okay, so you have, how about 15,000? 15,000. Okay, 20,000. I still have 3. Okay, I'm going to slow down. 21,000. One down. Did somebody just say 42,000? You just ruined it. Okay, hold on. So we'll jump to 40. All right, is there a hand? Okay, listen, get your hands up. It's dark in here. Can we turn the lights on? Evidently, there's one here. Wasn't there somebody in here? Oh, did you give up? You were so close. I'm sorry, you're out. And you're still here. Was there somebody back here saying 42? Oh, it's you. 46? Where? You have 46,000 pictures on your phone. 46,000. Well, hey, here's a King Street thing for a free drink. You win. 46,000. That is amazing. So, for some reason, me and my wife's iPhone are linked, so we have 20,000 combined, but I will tell you, 10 of them are just my 3-year-old's forehead, like that. So I don't know does that count? Here's the crazy thing, though. I recently read this study by some researchers at the University of California, Santa Cruz, and the study was looking at the relationship between photos and memory. Photos and memory. Because, in my opinion, and I don't know about you, maybe you share this, the idea behind pictures is to capture the moment. The idea behind pictures is to help you remember better, right? Isn't that kind of what we think when we take pictures? To immortalize the moment. I've always thought that taking a picture would enhance the memory of the moment. But what the study found, check this out, I'll read their little sentence, their conclusion. These researchers said that the research suggests that taking photos can impair a person's ability to remember the details of the experiences being photographed, an effect that even appears to linger after the camera has been put down. Isn't that crazy? So they actually said that it hurts you. Sorry, that's why I gave you a free drink. I'm like, hey, you have no memory of your life. 46,000 pictures. I'm surprised you made it here. I don't know. But they're saying that like in that little micro window when you pull your phone out and you take the picture, and then a little bit of a window after that, something happens in your brain where it doesn't store the information at quite the same level as if you hadn't done it. They even did little different test groups, and one of the test group that did the worst with memory was the group that took the picture and then posted it to Instagram, Snapchat, some kind of social media. They actually had the least vivid memory of that moment. I thought, man, for me that was like completely the opposite of what I would have thought. I thought that it was going to help me absorb the moment, but it turns out it makes it a little more difficult. So now, what do you do with that, right? They always have these studies, and then like, what's the actual action item? I don't think it's telling us to stop taking pictures. I think you should definitely do that. But they were suggesting that, hey, if you really want to absorb a moment, if you really want to be there, all your senses engaged, and you really want to have a memory that you can treasure and hear, put the phone down and be present. And I think that memory is just so important, right? Your memories are part of what make you, you. Your ability to recall, it kind of attaches present you with past you. Your memories are kind of a framework through which you see the world, right? You interpret your present, you anticipate your future, in large part in the context of your memory of what your past has been like. Memory, so important. So what I want to do today is I want to look at the connection between your memory and your faith. Your memory and your faith. There is a deep, deep connection between the two. So like I said, we've been in the book of Esther. I'll give you a real quick Cliff's Notes to catch you up. The people of Israel, the Jewish people, are currently in captivity in this empire called Persia, and where we're at in the story, they were under a death sentence. They were supposed to be killed on this certain day, all of them exterminated. The whole Jewish race was supposed to be exterminated. But God, in this story, moves and positions and provides so that they're not going to be annihilated. They're actually going to be saved. He used Queen Esther, who the book is named after, and her cousin Mordecai to deliver the Jews from this death sentence. But the way it happens is really interesting, and that's the part we're at today. So if you don't know about the empire of Persia, one of the weird quirks of this empire was once you signed something into law, it couldn't be undone. So they signed the thing, they sealed it with the king's seal. You couldn't go back and undo the law. You didn't have like a Supreme Court that could come back and say, hey, you can't do it. It was just done. So they had to have like a clever solution to this. And what they ended up doing is the king allowed Mordecai to write a new law, and he wrote a law that allowed the Jews to defend themselves on this day when they were supposed to be killed. So the first law says you can kill the Jewish people on this day and you can take all their stuff. And then the second law was, okay, but they're allowed to defend themselves. So that's kind of the way this whole thing is going to go down. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to give you the Cliff's Notes version of chapter 9. This is where this all happened, the beginning of chapter 9. If you read the beginning of Esther chapter 9, have you ever seen the movie Purge? There's a bunch of them now. It's a creepy movie. That's what kind of happens. It's total anarchy. Everybody just kind of rises up and they're at each other's throats for one day, and then it actually ends up being 2 days. But the Jewish people prevail. So when they were supposed to be killed, they end up actually becoming more powerful. Everything in this story just gets flipped on its head. So this day that was supposed to be the worst day ever ends up being the best day ever. And God saves them providentially through working through just a couple of people. It's a spectacular victory. If you ever read the book of Esther, there's so many moments where you're like, how is this ever going to go right? It would be one of those movies you'd be watching and you're like, how are they ever going to get out of this? It just seems like they're going to for sure be dead. This is like one of the best comeback stories ever. Better than coming down after being down 3-1 in the finals. Like it's a better story even than that. Come on, it's the Brown. We have like one good thing that's ever happened in sports history in Cleveland. I still hold on to that. This was a crazy, unexpected, miraculous comeback here. God just moved in this story. In 2 days, everything flips. What I want to look at, though, is what happens right after that. So the big climax of the story is they end up not being killed, they end up being saved, but right after that, this is what happens. Chapter 9, verse 20. Mordecai recorded these events and sent letters to the Jews near and far throughout all the province of King Xerxes, calling on them to celebrate an annual festival on these 2 days. Verse 22, He told them to celebrate these days with feasting and gladness by giving of gifts of food to each other and presents to the poor. This would commemorate a time when the Jews gained relief from their enemies and when their sorrow was turned to gladness and their mourning turned into joy. So Mordecai here is suggesting not just to have a party because they survived, but he's saying, let's make this an annual thing. Let's make this like a holiday. That's what he's suggesting here. Drop down to verse 26. He continues. So because of Mordecai's letter and because of what they had experienced, the Jews throughout the realm agreed to inaugurate this tradition and pass it on to their descendants and all who became Jews. They declared they would never fail to celebrate these 2 prescribed days at the appointed time each year. Verse 28, I love this. These days would be remembered and kept from generation to generation and celebrated by every family throughout the province, the cities of the empire. This festival of Purim would never cease to be celebrated among the Jews, nor would the memory of what happened ever die out among their descendants. So we're not just going to throw a party after we're going to memorialize this day. We're going to be intentional about remembering. We're not going to forget to remember. We're going to remember the way God moved and this amazing delivery of the people of Israel. Now, what's crazy about this? I just read these verses to you. These verses were written thousands of years ago. Do you know that the Jewish people still celebrate this holiday? They're still listening to Mordecai. When he sent these letters out, they're still doing it. Almost 3,000 years later, the festival of Purim. I think the next one is March 23rd and 24th of 2024, if you want to jump in on this. Let me describe it to you because it is awesome. The festival of Purim, the best way I could describe it is it's kind of a combination of Christmas, Halloween, and St. Patrick's Day. Isn't that cool? Some of you are like, what? Those are my 3 favorite holidays. Maybe in that order. So they give gifts, because you saw that, right? Mordecai said, hey, give gifts to each other, so that's kind of Christmas. They dress up. But the reason is so cool. The dress-up thing is so cool to me. I read this. The reason they dress up and they pretend to be something else is in the story of Esther, God works behind the scenes. God is hard to recognize in the story. I don't know if you know this, but the name of God isn't even mentioned in the book of Esther at all. They never talk about praying. God is completely hidden in the story, but so clearly moving. So when they dress up, it's kind of the symbolic thing to say just because you don't recognize doesn't mean he's not there. So I think that's cool. It's a way cooler reason to dress up than Halloween. And then, believe it or not, drinking is a part of this holiday, heavy drinking in some cases, chill. I think it's because if you read the story of Esther, there's a lot of drinking in the story. So that might be why. And I'm not trying to give you like another reason, but it's a Browns game. You're fine. Haman's the name of the bad guy, right? They also make, this is a fun little detail, they make these little triangular pastries and they call them Haman's ear. I don't know why they eat a guy's ear. And then in all the synagogues, they read the story of Esther in its entirety. They just read the whole thing. But it's kind of a crowd participation thing. Every time Haman's name is mentioned, they boo and they hiss and they rap their knuckles on things, just kind of heckling this guy who's been dead for 3,000 years. I don't know why I get a kick out of that. I think it's kind of cool. But the whole idea is for them not to forget. They want to remember this thing. Now, back up to Mordecai for a minute. So think about this. Mordecai, they just survived this day where they were all supposed to die. Mordecai, if you remember, if you've been following in the story, he just got promoted to second in command over the entire empire. Right below Xerxes is Mordecai now. Isn't it crazy? The first thing he did, they win this great victory. He's exhausted. He sits down, and the first official act that he commits as this second in command now is to write this letter. Say, hey, we're gonna celebrate this forever. Isn't that interesting? You have to ask why. Like, why would Mordecai think it's so important to sit down and have his first act be, hey, we're gonna celebrate this every single year forever? Like, that's nuts. Why would he do that? So, if I asked you to sit down with just the Old Testament, Okay, read the whole Old Testament. It'd be a good exercise. You'd have a little hard time in Numbers when it gets to all the names and stuff. You can go fast through that part. If you just read the whole Old Testament, and if I asked you, hey, in the Old Testament, the Israelite people, I want you to just write like a list of one-word descriptors of the people of Israel. And every time you came up with something like, ooh, this is kind of a common theme with the people of Israel, I want you to like write down the word. So you'd probably write the word stubborn, right? You'd write the word blessed. You'd have a really cool list of words describing the people of Israel. But I believe if you did it right, and I'd grade really heavily, you'd have to get this right. In your top 10 list of words that would describe the people of Israel, one of the words you would write is forgetful. They were super forgetful. Their memories, terrible. The people of Israel as a whole had a propensity, had a tendency to forget. Their MO was to constantly forget. And the main object of their forgetfulness was God. They just consistently, throughout their existence, forgot God. They forgot the things that God had just done. They would forget God's presence. They would forget God's promises. Past, present, future. They were so forgetful. It was just a part of who they were. Now, every time I read the Old Testament, every time I read the people of Israel's story, I always kind of associate with the people as a whole. I always kind of feel like they are a lesson to us now. And I gotta say, I think if you're a Christian, I think we, like the people of Israel, are also horrible at remembering. They were terrible at remembering. They were terrible at remembering the things that God had just done. They were terrible at remembering God's presence in their life. They were terrible at remembering God's promises about their future. And I think a lot of times we are too. And maybe this is you. Maybe you are terrible at remembering God in your life. Maybe it's just really easy to forget. But what I want you to see is that there's a really deep connection between your ability to remember and your faith. I actually think that, like, again, I don't know if you think about that ever, like, what contributes to my faith growing or not in my life? I'm going to tell you, your ability to intentionally remember is going to be a huge part of your faith either growing or shrinking in your life. I really do. Your memory is so important because sometimes you fail to remember things you should, and other times you remember things that you should really be done with and you should forget. Remembering is so important. So what I want to do, I'll take it kind of from a negative perspective. I want to share with you 4 things that happen when you forget to remember, specifically God in your life. When you forget to remember, these 4 things happen, and these 4 things are not things that you want. And they're going to affect not just your relationship with God, they're going to affect your relationship with everyone. They're going to affect your entire existence if you fail to remember the way you should. 4 things. The first thing that happens to you when you forget to remember is you lose gratitude. You lose gratitude. If you cannot remember what God has done for you, you're not going to be a very grateful person. If you don't remember to remember, when God supplies a need, and then you get to another stage in your life where you have another need, you're going to just go right into the I need this, and you're going to forget to be grateful for what he's already done. And what ends up happening, if that becomes a pattern, if you continually forget to remember God in your life and all the things that God has done in your life, and you perpetually only live in the present, you're going to go from one need to another need, from one crisis to another crisis, and you're always going to be zoomed in, and you're going to immediately forget that God just supplied that one because now I need this one. And as soon as that one's supplied, you're going to go on to the next one. And you're not going to be a grateful person because you're not remembering all the things that God has done for you in your life. You'll go from woe is me to woe is me to woe is me, and you're not going to have that deep level gratitude that you should carry with you because God has brought you this far. Parents. So we just had child dedication. This is kind of perfect. How many parents know could come up here and testify that there is a link between memory and gratitude. How many of your kids have amnesia? Anybody's kids have amnesia? My kids, dude, it's actually a little bit scary, and I'm genuinely concerned for my children. I don't know if you guys have this. I hope you have this, because otherwise mine have serious problems. We can get done with dinner, and always, I don't know about you guys, the first question we get after dinner is, can I have dessert? It's just, and they'll be half done with dinner. It's always a fight, like, well, okay, and this is always my hook. I don't know if you guys do this. It's bribery or parenting, the same thing. Like, finish your dinner and you can have dessert. Like, you got to finish that, you got to finish that. Well, it'll be over. They'll have dessert, and I kid you not, an hour later, they will come up to me or Lisa and go, can I have dessert now? And I'm like, am I on the same planet? And here's the thing. I don't know what your kids are like. My kids are little lawyers. What did I have? And if I don't describe it to them perfectly, they don't believe me. They're like, that never happened. I have to show them the dirty bowl. That was ice cream. You ate that. It's crazy. But parents, again, I feel like I've learned so much about God just kind of flipping roles, because I know God is the father to me. And when I see this in my kids, I have to turn around and go, ooh, I do that to him sometimes. But they don't remember anything. And it really hurts their gratitude level. I mean, how many of you gotten to an end of a really fun day with your kids and they don't get one thing that they wanted at the end of the day, and they're like, this day sucks. And you're like, I spent $200 on just you today, and you think, that's crazy. And again, it shows you this link between the ability to remember rightly and your gratitude level. And this applies to us too. So how's your memory? How's your gratitude level? Do you rehearse in your mind the things that God has done for you in your life, specifically when things are difficult? Do you remember? Are you intentional about remembering? Remember, Mordecai didn't leave this to chance, right? He didn't just say, I hope you guys remember this year in, year out. No, he was like, let's formalize this thing. Let's make it a thing. Let's make it a holiday. Let's write it down. Let's be intentional about this. Are you intentional about your remembering of the things that God has done for you in your life? Are you intentional about it? Now, some of you, maybe when I say you need to be intentional about remembering, maybe for you, you're like, dude, if I remember stuff, it's not going to be good stuff. I actually have a lot of crap memories. I have a lot of bad memories. I don't know that gratitude is going to be the thing that explodes out of my heart if I start remembering stuff. And I get that. But I want to say, there's nobody in this room who has a perfectly happy library of memories, right? All of us have. Everybody sitting here has a mixture of good and bad that has happened to us in our life. Some of us certainly more bad than others, and some of us have some really dark chapters in those books. And I don't want to minimize that, but I also want to say, don't you think that you can be intentional about what you remember? You can choose to focus on certain things, and it will produce certain things inside of you. So I actually, in my life, I'm really, really intentional about this because I am constantly worried that the things I get frustrated with and the things I want to complain about are so, first world problems, that I think about this. I imagine all the time, being able to talk to some of these Bible heroes, if I could talk to the Apostle Paul and be like, hey man, this is the stuff I'm dealing with, and have him look at me and go, you wimp, what's wrong with you? So I'm always constantly aware of this. So I intentionally practice some things. So I want to give you just a couple of things that I do mentally, constantly, all the time, just trying to remind myself to be grateful. And they're little things and they apply to everybody. So here's one. Here's one thing I do, and and if you think it's weird, I don't care. You're weird. When you get up in the morning and you walk about 10 feet to the bathroom, and you turn on the water, I want you to remember that there are 2 billion people on this earth who don't have easy access to clean water. What do you think that would do to your gratitude level? Because let's be honest, it's really easy to just assume that's a normal thing. It's if I said, hey, be grateful for when you turn the shower on, you're gonna be like, why though? What? Everybody has a shower. 2 billion people don't. Matter of fact, they have to walk a long way just to get drinking. They drink that. And you're waiting for it to get hot and you're letting it go down the drain and whatever, you don't want to get in a cold shower. But for me, I do, and I'm telling you, I've trained myself to be like, when I go in there and turn the faucet on, or when I go in there and turn the shower on, to be like, thanks, God, that I'm born here in this time and in this place, because I want to be grateful for that. I want that my disposition to be, this is really cool. Because think about it. If you went back in time and showed some people who lived, a couple hundred years ago the way you live, they would be out of their mind jealous of you. That you walk 10 feet and have a waterfall that warms up and you get to get clean under it. They'd be blown away by that. So I want to be grateful for that. Another thing, another little practice. If you have glasses or contacts, if you got 20/20 vision, whatever, we all hate you. But for the rest of us, sometime today, no, not now, sometime today, take your contacts out, take your glasses off, and go outside. Try to look around. And remember that it wasn't until the 1800s that corrective lenses became common usage. It was invented a while, but it wasn't for the masses until about a couple hundred years ago. So for thousands of years, I want you to have your glasses off when you're doing this. For thousands of years, that would have just been your life. Somebody would have been like, aren't the stars pretty? And you'd be like, what are stars? I've never seen them before. For real, some of you can't even see the moon, right? You're like, I don't even know what that is. What are you talking about? And you would never know. You do this and look at a tree and look at the leaves that you can see and then the blob of green that you see without it. And remember that for hundreds and thousands of years, people just didn't see. And that was just their life. And you have this blessing of being able to see clearly. And I think that every time I put my contacts on, I don't like putting contacts on, and it's annoying when I put my glasses on and it gets smudges on them. My kids always touch them, and it's always annoying, but I want to be grateful for them. Because this is magic. Again, if you could go back and show somebody from hundreds of years, like, hey, look through this, and they'd be like, what? I didn't know there was such thing as leaves. Like, they would be blown away. And here we are, taking it for granted. Let me give one more example. This is personal to me, but I want you to see how God can kind of flip something. The other couple weeks ago, I had to get my youngest son, 6 years old, had to get his adenoids out. And I know, it's not that big of a deal, right? But anytime your kid goes under anesthesia, it's a scary thing, right? As a parent, if you've ever had that happen, it's just, you get a little... Now, I'm an introvert, so there's some things that I really hate that maybe if you're not an introvert, you might not understand. So like when we were driving that day to the hospital, I get irritated parking. Okay, so all the introverts get this. Everybody's not, parking's, especially if I've never been to a place and I have to find where to park at the place, I hate it. So I was driving in, it's a parking deck, this is Wadsworth, we don't have parking decks, and you're going around and up and you're not sure what you're doing and trying to find the right level to get the bridge that goes across to the right place, and I feel myself, I'm just not pleasant to be around in these circumstances, you can ask my wife. And we got out, and I was starting to do that thing, because I'm already nervous about my kid having surgery, and it's not that big of a deal, so I'm trying to talk myself out of it, but I'm like, and I'm irritated about parking. And then as an introvert, now I have to do the second stage, which is go into a building that I'm not familiar with, and I don't know where to go, and talk to people that I don't know, I'm not familiar with. And all these things are kind of building inside of me. And I'm a big boy, I can do it, but it's still annoying, and I can feel myself getting on edge. And then God just kind of got a hold of me, and I never tell you that God speaks to me, but he just kind of taps me on the shoulder. And man, it just moved me so much. It was just this idea, hey, aren't you grateful you don't know where you're going right now at a children's hospital? Aren't you grateful you have no idea where to park? Aren't you grateful you have no idea where to go? Aren't you grateful that this doctor doesn't know your kid's name? And I was like, ooh, yes, Lord. And it completely shifted the way I was looking at this, because at first it was this inconvenience and this frustration, and if you're like me, you can go real woe is me real quick, but immediately it was like God kind of just two-hand shoves me in the chest and said, you should be grateful you don't know where you're going right now. And it just I went from grumpy to gratitude like that. No, Lord, thank you. And when I was turning down hallways, not knowing, thank you for this crossroads that I don't know where I'm going, because I know there are people who do know. And I just don't want to take that kind of thing for granted. So here's the quote. I don't know who said this. It haunts me. I want this to haunt you a little bit. there are so many things that we have in our life that if we didn't have them, we would pay $1 million to have, but having them, we ignore them. I don't want to live like that. When I get up in the morning, I sit up and I put my 2 feet on the ground. I want to be grateful for that because there's some people who can't do that. When I open my eyes, I want to be grateful for that. When I hug my kids, I want to be grateful for that. I want to do a better job remembering because it increases my gratitude level. So what's your gratitude level right now? If you're not feeling very thankful in your life, maybe one of the things you need to be a little more intentional about is how are you doing at remembering? That's the first thing. If you don't remember very well, you'll lose gratitude. The second thing is you'll lose, if you forget to remember, is you'll lose humility. You'll lose humility. If you're not intentional about remembering God in your life, humility goes because you start to think that you got yourself here. You start to think that you are awesome and you got you this far because you're remembering wrong. You think it was your strength, your smarts, your awesomeness that got you here. And so many times in the Bible, God intentionally does things in such a way so that the people of Israel can't do that. If you ever heard the story of Gideon, I love the story of Gideon. That's why one of my son's name is Gideon. But Gideon has to go up against this massive army, and he gathers as many troops as he can. And he's like, God, what do you think? And God's like, you have too many men, which is absurd military strategy, right? Like nobody ever says that. I think you have too many troops. Like, no, that's crazy. Without that story, we would never think that's true. But God's like, you have too many. But God's reason was, hey, if you take that many troops into battle, sometime in the future, you're going to look back on this and you're going to think that you won this victory. And I want to make it so that you know it was me. And that when you remember it, it's so absurd that you won that you have to say, wow, God really showed up. So God really cares about this stuff. And I want to say you have situations in your life, if you remember rightly, that you were praying and you were desperate and you needed God to show up, and he did. I'm just asking, do you rightly remember those situations? Or do you do that thing where as soon as the good thing happens, you just move on to the next thing? Or you explain it away like, oh man, I don't know if that was you or not, God. And God's like, you were praying. It was me. Are you remembering rightly? If you don't remember God's faithfulness in your life, you're going to lose humility. There's another quote that scares me. I really striking out on my footnotes here today. I asked the internet who said this, and the internet disagreed vehemently about who said this, so I don't know. It's anonymous. But I love this quote because if you struggle with thinking you got you here, that you got yourself this far, the quote is, the problem with the self-made man is he worships his maker. And I thought that was pretty clever. I don't want to slip into that. I don't want you to slip into that and thinking that you got you here. So that's the second thing that you lose when you forget to remember. You lose humility, you lose gratitude. Third thing, here's what I want you to do. To introduce the third thing, I want you to picture something in your mind right now. Picture an ungrateful, prideful person. Don't look at the person sitting next to you. Look straight ahead. Picture an ungrateful, prideful person. Now tell me, are they smiling? Probably not, right? The third thing you lose when you forget to remember is joy. Joy. An ungrateful, prideful person is not a joyful person. It's one of the things you automatically lose when you forget to remember. Or if you remember wrong. And this kind of happens too. So again, the people of Israel, that's why, remember, Mordecai had them celebrate this on purpose because the people of Israel are terrible at remembering rightly. So they get out of Egypt, right? They were in slavery in Egypt and they leave and they're on their way to the promised land. Remember, slavery's horrible. They were making bricks. They were building walls. Egypt was awful to them, and they're delivered. They're on their way to the promised land. One of the things that happens, a little micro story in the Bible, the road to the promised land gets a little tough. It's a little hard. And they have the guts to start talking about how good the food was back in Egypt. That's crazy. They were out in the hot sun. They were getting whipped. Their kids were getting just taken from them. But the lunches were good, though. Like, that's how they were talking. Their memory, they were remembering wrong. They had this like false nostalgia for where they had been, and it stole their joy from where they were. And I just want to say, man, I don't want to live like that. I don't want to live in this always romanticizing what was and allowing it to steal the joy of what is. Don't remember wrong. Don't let the past, your failure to remember correctly, steal your joy in the present. So you lose joy, you lose gratitude, you lose humility, you lose joy, and the last thing you lose if you fail to remember is faith. If you don't remember what God has done in your life, your faith is going to shrink. Your faith is going to shrink. Same story, people of Israel. They get delivered out of Egypt. And if you remember the story, it's nuts. Like 10 plagues in Egypt, God shows up, shows out, just blasts Egypt. The most obvious, overwhelming supernatural acts in the entire Bible happen in the Exodus story. So the people of Israel leave and they're on the edge of the Red Sea. You remember this part? And then Egypt changes its mind and they bring some chariots and they're coming and they see them on the horizon. Now, if Israel remembers rightly, if Israel is good at remembering, when they see those chariots, their response should be, oh, Egypt's coming. We get an 11th plague. This is going to be so cool. What's God going to do? Like, here's bonus time. God's going to show up. They should be getting their lawn chairs out because they get a front row seat to whatever God's going to do to deliver them, if they were remembering rightly. But if you know the story, that's not what they do, because they're terrible at remembering. God just delivered them. God just did these miracles, and they freak out. They act like they're about to be destroyed because they fail to remember. So a couple of years ago, I preached this sermon. I used to do these things called State of the Church sermons. It was 5 years ago. I preached one. And I just kind of tell people how the church was doing and stuff. And I had this illustration planned with this being a part of it. You ever seen those YouTube videos of the dominoes where one domino falls and then the bigger one is the next one and the next one's bigger and the next one's bigger and it ends like absurdly big, but it started super small? You ever seen those? It's really cool. Because I think scientifically speaking, a domino can knock over another domino. It's like 1.5 times its size, and you can keep going, and it gets big real fast. It's really cool. Cool illustration. Had somebody from the church build me a little set. I think it ended almost at my height. But it started with this one. This was the first one. 5 years ago, preached this. Now, context, it was a state of the church. I'm telling everybody, hey, this is how we're doing. But that year, it was 2017, we had zero growth as a church, zero. Now, for me to admit that, you guys got to know, if you know pastors, we count pregnant people twice. Like this, you find a way, right, to make it whatever it is. But there was just no way around it. We had flatlined that year. And I'm giving the state of the church. State of the church is supposed to be like the celebration. Look at all the stuff God has done. And I had to stand up here and be like, hey, actually this year was rough, man. And I was doing the thing, and I don't know, so you have to empathize with me as a pastor. Like, that's a really hard thing to do. Like, I want to lead, I want it to be good, I want it to be positive, and I'm trying to like put on my best face, but I was discouraged. I'm like, man, what is going on? So part of the sermon was this idea that with a small step of faith, you know, God can do a lot of things with it. And, you knock over the first domino, it knocks over the second one's bigger, and then it lands on this huge thing. So I was trying to get people to see, hey, even with a small step of faith, God can do something with that. But the backstory is, the guy who built these, he's not here today. I'm super disappointed. I'm going to shame him later. He had this one as the first one, and I didn't believe that this first one, because it's so light, I didn't think it was going to knock over the second one. So nobody noticed this. But when I knocked the first one over, I intentionally had my hand hit into the second one as well to ensure that it would fall over, because I knew that one was big enough that it would keep going. So I knocked both of them over, and only one person noticed, the guy who made it. And he came up to me afterwards. He goes, hey, what was that? And I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, you're a pastor. You can't lie. I'm like, okay, you're right. And he handed this to me, and he gave it to me, and he wrote the word faith on it. It's all faded now. You can't really see it now. But he said it would have worked, man. It would have worked. I tested it like 100 times. And I kept it. I put this little thing, it sits behind my sink. Every single day I see this. And for me, now when I look back, I mean, if you only knew, some of you, if you're here for the first time, you have no idea the stuff God's done just in the past couple of years here. But like 2017, we didn't grow at all. We've like doubled in size like twice in the past couple of years. It's crazy because it does feel like this domino thing, like where it started small and you could barely see the difference, and now all of a sudden you just see God moving in these crazy big ways. But what I want you to see, what's important for me is to remember this. That's why I have this. It's a little memento for me to say, hey, remember when it was hard? Hey, remember when you weren't sure if God was going to move? Hey, remember when you used to pray, Lord, I feel like you want to do something big with this church, but it's not happening. So I want to say, God, even if we don't grow by one more person for the rest of my life, if this is what you want me to do, I'm going to do it. And I prayed those prayers when it was like this. And I was like, I'm willing to do whatever you want me to do, but it was really hard. If I don't remember that, I can get so caught up in the right now that I lose the context from which how far God has brought me. My faith will be nothing compared to what it would be if I remember this. And now I'm almost dumb about it because like God has moved in so many different ways. I'm just like, what? God's gonna move? God's gonna move? I'm almost like carefree about it because I've seen God do the miraculous and move and provide and just continue to move and move and move. Now when I hit a point where I'm like, I don't know what's going to happen, I just have this faith that comes from remembering all the things that God has done in my life. So you got to remember. So what I want to suggest, do you have things like this? Maybe you should, and maybe it'd be different for everybody. Like, wouldn't it be cool if you had like a little room in your house that had a bunch of stuff like this, like little symbols of times that remind you of how God has been faithful in your life, of times where you weren't sure what was gonna happen, and he came through and he did the thing, and like you wanna remember that moment. And maybe for some of you, it's like a journal. Maybe for some of you, it's weird little mementos like this. Maybe for some of you, ironically, it might be pictures on your phone. I don't know. It might help you remember in that case. But wouldn't it be cool if you had almost like a hall of faith where you said, hey, I'm gonna have these things. I'm gonna intentionally remember these moments because these are the times that God has come through. Like Mordecai, I don't wanna forget. I wanna formalize this and almost rehearse it in my head. God has showed up here, God has showed up here. You know, remember when David was going to fight Goliath and he told Saul, hey, I fought the lion, I fought the bear, I'm gonna kill the giant because he remembered rightly how God had showed up in his life. That's how this is supposed to work, church. You're supposed to remember all the times God has moved, and when you're on the edge of the new, you have all that behind you saying, nah, God's gonna come through. God's got this. Remember to remember. And our starting place always, Christian, is remember that Jesus died for you. That's part 1A is remembering this is how my relationship with God started. Jesus gave me what I did not deserve. He forgave me when I didn't deserve it. He's loved me. He's given me a relationship with God, a future home in heaven. That is part 1, and everything from there is cherry on top. Don't forget. Pray with me. God, I pray for the person right now who struggles to remember. Maybe even right now they're sitting here thinking, I can't do what's being suggested because maybe they just don't feel like they have those memories to go back to. Lord, I pray you'd help them. I pray you'd help them see your invisible hand working in their life. I pray that you would bring things to mind, Lord. I pray for the person who struggles with gratitude, that you'd help them remember your goodness in their life, Help them to see it, Lord, with new eyes, the things that you've done that they should not be taking for granted. That if they didn't have them, they'd pay $1 million to have them, Lord. I pray that they would have a renewed gratitude for the mundane things of life. Lord, I pray for the person who struggles with the idea that maybe they think they got themselves this far. Lord, I pray that they would see your hand throughout their life. That they would see that you are the one who's come through. You are the one who's provided. Lord, I pray that you would bring those moments to the top of their mind and that it would be a thing that they would not forget. Lord, I pray for the person who's struggling with joy right now. Their joy is being stolen from them, Lord, and I pray that you would use their memories to bring it back. That you've brought them this far, that you're here and present in their life, and that they have what lies ahead of them is better than what lies behind them. And that should sprout joy. Lord, and I pray for the person who's struggling with their faith right now. I pray that you would be present right now. That they would remember the lion and the bear. They would remember those times that you've shown up in their life inexplicably. And that their faith would grow as they look backwards. Lord, thank you for the cross. I thank you for this. Lord, I pray that we'd be a church that remembers well, that remembers to remember, and that we would grow because of it. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.